One Friday afternoon, my wife, Melissa, sat me down to talk about her plans for the coming weekend. I remember that moment very clearly. I was honestly quite happy for her when she explained everything. She told me that she was going to spend a few days away on a special fishing trip with several people from her office. To me, it sounded like a perfect and wonderful way for her to get away from all the busy stress of the workplace. I thought it would be so good for her to truly relax in nature, breathe the fresh air, and just be still for a while. She seemed very excited about it and spent a lot of her free time getting every little thing ready for the trip. I watched her pack her big tackle box until it was full of colorful lures and shiny hooks. She found her sturdy hiking boots that she uses for the forest trails and put them by the door. She even spent time picking out enough food and healthy supplies to last for 3 whole days by the side of a peaceful, quiet lake. It was nice to see her so focused on something fun. Just before she finally headed out the door on Friday, she gave me a very sweet kiss goodbye that I still remember. She took a moment to warn me that there would be almost no cell phone service at the campground. She told me I should not worry or feel scared if I could not reach her by phone for a while. I smiled and told her to have a wonderful, relaxing time. I stood in the driveway and watched her drive away in her car, feeling a warm glow in my heart and feeling genuinely glad that she was getting this much-needed break from her daily life. However, by the time Saturday afternoon came around, the house started to feel a bit too quiet and empty without her there. I missed her voice and her laugh. I started thinking about how much she always loves my cooking and how it makes her smile. After a little while, I decided to do something extra special to show her I was thinking of her. I thought it would be a beautiful and kind surprise to show up at the lake with her favorite homemade pie, still warm and smelling sweet from the oven, along with a big thermos of fresh, hot coffee. I sat in the kitchen and imagined how happy and surprised she would be to see me standing there. I felt like such a good husband in that moment. I got into my old truck and started the long, slow drive toward the water. It took nearly 3 hours of driving to reach the remote lakeside cabin she had described to me. The roads were very narrow and winding, moving further and further away from the city and everything else. Finally, I pulled into the dirt area near the cabin and stepped out of my truck into the cool air. But almost immediately, I felt a strange, heavy knot forming in my stomach. I stood there for a second and truly wished I had not come at all. The campground looked nothing like the quiet place Melissa had described to me. There were no wooden fishing boats tied up at the dock like I expected. I did not see any plastic coolers filled with bait or groups of her friendly coworkers getting their gear ready for a long day on the water. Instead of quiet, sleepy fishing camp, I saw several very expensive, fancy cars parked in a row outside the biggest and nicest cabin on the lot. The sound of very loud music was bouncing across the surface of the water, and I could hear people laughing and chatting loudly on the big wooden deck. They all had cold drinks in their hands and seemed to be having a big, noisy party. I started walking slowly toward the building, my heart beating very fast against my ribs. Through the wide-open glass patio doors, I saw her. It was Melissa, but she was not wearing her old fishing clothes or her heavy hiking boots like she said she would. She was dressed up in beautiful clothes, looking like she was going to a fancy evening event. She was laughing and smiling more than I had seen in months. There was another man standing very, very close to her. He had his arm wrapped casually and comfortably around her shoulders, and she did not move away. My feet just stopped moving completely. My mind was trying so hard to make sense of what I was seeing, but it was very hard to take it all in at once. For several long, painful seconds, I just stood there in the green grass. I was holding the heavy cooler in one hand and that warm, homemade pie in the other. I watched as Melissa laughed at something the man whispered softly in her ear. She leaned even closer to him, looking completely happy and at peace. Then, someone inside the cabin spotted me standing alone near the door. Their big smile vanished in a single second. Melissa turned her head toward the entrance, still laughing, until her eyes finally met mine. I watched the color drain right out of her face until she was as white as a sheet. The whole room suddenly went very, very silent. People stopped talking right in the middle of their sentences. The man standing next to her slowly took his arm off her shoulders and stepped back. Everyone there realized that I was not just another guest coming to join the fun. I was a husband who was supposed to be at home, the person she thought would never show up and see the truth. Melissa hurried outside to meet me on the grass. Her voice was shaking, and she looked like she wanted to run away and hide. She whispered to me, "Michael, please, this is not what it looks like." I did not look at her right away, because my heart was too heavy. Instead, I looked past her into the cabin. I saw the fishing equipment she had packed so carefully on Friday. It was all stacked neatly against the far wall, but it had not been touched at all. I could see that most of it still had the bright price tags from the store on it. It had never been used for a single minute. "Then tell me," I said in a very quiet, tired voice, "when exactly was anyone planning on going fishing?" She opened her mouth to say something, but she could not find any words to use. The lie was falling apart right there in front of both of us. There had never been a weekend on the lake with people from her work. The fishing trip was just a story she made up in her head. It was a lie that allowed everything else to happen without me asking any questions or getting suspicious about where she was. Realizing that hurt more than any loud argument we had ever had in our whole marriage. I did not want to cause a scene or make people look at us. I quietly placed the cooler and the homemade pie on the wooden porch steps. Then I turned around and started walking back to my truck without saying another word. Melissa reached out and grabbed my arm with her hand. I could see big tears already starting to fill her eyes and roll down her cheeks. She begged me, "Please don't leave like this." I gently but firmly stepped away from her hand. I told her that I had driven 3 long hours because I wanted to make her smile. Instead, she had shown me the sad truth about who she really was. She started crying even harder then, telling me she could explain everything if I would just sit down and listen to her talk. I just shook my head sadly. The explanation was not the hardest part for me to handle anymore. The hardest part was knowing that the woman I trusted more than anyone else in the world had sat down and planned this whole weekend out. She knew exactly what she was asking me to believe, and she did it anyway, day after day. The drive back home felt so much longer than the trip to the lake. The pie I had made with such care and love sat untouched in the passenger seat next to me. It was a very painful reminder of the surprise I had hoped to give to my wife. My phone rang over and over again in the dark truck. I saw Melissa's name flashing on the screen, but I just could not bring myself to pick it up and talk. I was not trying to punish her by being silent. I simply felt like I had nothing left to ask or say. The things I saw at the cabin kept playing over and over in my mind like a movie I could not stop watching. By the time I finally got home, I realized I was not looking for excuses or long explanations. I was trying to decide if our marriage could ever recover from such a planned and deliberate lie. The next morning, Melissa came home much earlier than she had originally planned. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying all through the night. She finally sat down and admitted that the whole fishing trip had been an excuse from the very start. She told me that her relationship with the other man had only started a short time ago. She claimed she never meant for me to find out the way I did. I sat there and listened to her for a very long time. Then I asked her just one simple question. If I had not driven all that way to the cabin yesterday, would you have ever told me the truth? She looked down at the wooden floor for a long time without speaking. Then she whispered, "Probably not." That honest answer hurt more than every other lie she had told me. Over the next few weeks, we decided to go to a group of caring experts for counseling. I want to make sure that any big decisions we made were based on complete honesty and not just on how angry or sad I felt at the time. Melissa took full responsibility for what she had done to our life. She did not try to blame anyone else for the choices she made. I really appreciated that she was being sincere, but I also started to realize that trust is a very hard thing to fix once it is broken. You cannot just build it back up because someone feels bad about losing it. The affair was a deep wound, but the way she planned the lie was what really changed things for me. It changed how I saw every promise we had ever made together in our home. In the end, we both had to accept that some relationships have to end. It does not always happen because the love is totally gone. Sometimes it happens because you just cannot have confidence in each other anymore. You need to feel safe with the person you love. Months later, some of our friends asked me if I regretted making that long trip to the lake. My answer is always exactly the same. No, I do not regret it. The truth would have come out eventually. Finding it out sooner saved both of us from living in a fake version of our marriage for a much longer time. Looking back, I see that the drive to the campground was not the day everything fell apart. It was just the day I finally saw what was already happening behind my back. Even though it was very painful, having that clarity was better than being unsure and confused. It allowed me to start building my life again on real, honest ground instead of a happy lie that was not real. Today, I still enjoy going fishing when the weather is nice. But now, I usually go by myself or with my family who I trust. Every once in a while, I remember packing that homemade pie with so much excitement and hope. I remember how much I wanted to surprise the woman I loved. Instead, life gave me a different kind of surprise. It sounds a bit strange to say, but I am actually thankful it happened. The hardest truths often become the start of a much healthier and better future because they force us to stop believing in stories that are not real. I did not lose my marriage when I arrived at that lake. I lost it a long time ago when honesty disappeared from our home. The trip to the cabin just showed me what had already been broken for a very, very long time. I am learning to be happy again, one day at a time, knowing that honesty is the most important thing of all. It is better to be sad with the truth than happy with a lie.